Welcome back to the Sidetracked Sport podcast. I am your host, Jasmine, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking all about endometriosis and the menstrual cycle, and more importantly, how that impacts women participating in not just elite sport, but women participating in any sort of physical activity. And joining me to talk about this topic is a fellow journalist, Honor Dench. So, hello, Honor, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm really excited to be here and join you on your podcast. I think it's going to be great, and I'm so glad you've invited me along.
No worries. It's great to have you on. And so before we dive in, let's first just talk a little bit about what actually is endometriosis, because a lot of women, let alone a lot of men, have no idea or not sure really what it is. And so on the NHS website, they describe endometriosis as being where cells similar to those in the lining of the womb grow in other parts of the body. And that's just not in the women's reproductive part of the body, that could be anywhere in the body. So, which I think a lot of people don't realise as well. It's something I didn't realise until a few months ago, that it could grow almost anywhere. I found that quite a shock.
Yeah, I've heard it being in some very crazy locations. You can get it in your nose, you can get it in your lungs.
Yeah.
It can literally be anywhere.
That sounds terrifying to me. Some tissue that's supposed to be in your womb is growing in your lung like that. I can't comprehend
It
how
is
it's
scary,
possible. Yeah. And some of the symptoms which a lot of women would maybe relate to actually are really severe period pains, heavy periods, and quite bad fatigue. Not just, I feel a bit tired, but really, really struggling to get out of bed in the morning. And could you talk me through a little bit more on maybe what those symptoms are or how it might present in different people?
So they do present in different people differently. Some people will have the tissue growing elsewhere, but they may not actually face any pain, whereas others will get really strong pain. A really heavy blood flow is quite common. You can get pain going to the toilet and things like that, which is obviously not great at all. And one of the other things is it causes scar tissue and inflammation as well within you. So a lot of people might have nausea, they might faint as well. That's another symptom that's quite common. So yeah, it's really, really not that nice. There is a lot of things that you can face with endometriosis.
Yeah, and also I think it's quite important to recognise how many women it affects as well. I believe it's 1 in 10, which is a
It
crazy
is,
high
yeah.
number, especially when not very many people know about it. Other diseases or illnesses that are typically 1 in 10 people, a lot of people will know about, and they'll know what it is, how it presents, what you can do or can't do. So it's quite a big topic, but under researched, and that's sort of why
Yeah,
it's sort of
it's
why Honors
definitely
come
under
on,
researched.
because she's been doing a research project into endometriosis, and so has become quite educated on it, I'd like to say. I don't know if you'd
I
agree or
hope
not.
so.
um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, she's sort of here just to provide that extra input on sort of, not quite a specialist, because obviously we're not doctors, but she's done a lot of
No.
research into this topic recently. How does it impact women sort of day to day, have you found?
So day to day, and this is coming from what I've found, and I am someone that is waiting for a diagnosis myself. So it will really limit you, and it can leave you sort of bedridden, especially in that week of your period. And bedridden really is an awful symptom if you're an athlete, especially. And from speaking to some footballers, the pain they feel, things like back pain and being out of breath was quite common for them as well. And obviously, those would quite heavily impact your performance, and you don't want to make that lose your sponsors. You don't want to lose out on your actual ability, and you still want to prove yourself. And if you have to play a game or be at a very crucial competition the week of your period, it's quite a damning thought.
Yeah, it's like that whole idea of being bedridden for potentially up to a whole week is terrifying, really. And like you said, as an athlete, that's going to be completely detrimental to your career and your happiness as well. Like, it's obviously going to cause a lot of problems for some women. And actually, I believe there's also no cure, which is something that's quite
No,
hard. A lot
there's
of
yeah,
people.
there's things that can help reduce and relieve the symptoms, but there is no cure to stop it just growing back. So it's sort of life lasting, really.
Because a lot of women are recommended to get a hysterectomy, and that's that seems like quite a drastic option, but if you're going through this pain every single month, you can't get out of bed, or you're not able to do the things that you would normally be able to do because of this. As drastic as it seems, it also seems kind of logical, but if it's not a guaranteed cure, if the lining's growing elsewhere, I can't see how long term that would be a solution. And must be quite hard for someone who does have endometriosis like yourself to sort of come to terms with that, I guess.
It is. And I think what's harder is so on average, it takes 8 years and 10 months to get diagnosed. So for them to even diagnose you, and then that's when you're going to be hopefully given the options to have a removal, that's a good chunk of your life. And that's only if you're on the lower end of the average. If you're on the higher end, for some people, they've waited 20 plus years. So to go through all of that and then finally be told, oh, you do have it, like, would you like to look at this option? Would you like to look at this option? You just, by that point, you know what you want, I think, and you know you want it personally to have it completely removed. But also, it depends at what stage of your life you're at when you're being faced with those decisions. So I definitely think the hardest point is sort of waiting to be believed that you have it, and then hopefully being given the options to face it and not just brushed away.
Yeah, because I can imagine it kind of has that feeling of like you're hitting a brick wall, like you're trying to get to a point where, first of all, you're just having what you're feeling is being recognized, and you're getting that feeling of, you know, that what you've thought is right, which that in itself is quite important as well, because then you know you're not crazy. whilst whilst you probably know that yourself, it's nice to have that reassurance at the same time. And so 8 years, 10 months is just appalling. Like, that's a life-changing amount of time. Like, I can't, all the
It
things
is.
that happens in eight years is insane. It's not a decision that anyone should really have to make, let alone wait 8 years for.
No, it isn't. Yeah. And especially from the perspective of an athlete, it's very hard to make that decision during your career because obviously it's an operation you've got to recover from. But not only that, you lose your regular cycle then. And a lot of athletes rely and train on that and having the regular sort of hormone changes. So if they can't track that anymore, you don't want to then impact their performance even more because you have lost the routine essentially. So it's definitely a hard decision to make whether you're an athlete or not.
And I guess it's also that uncertainty of, then you don't know how it will impact your training after. Like, you're not going to be in this pain, or you're not going to have backaches, or you're not going to struggle with fatigue maybe as much, but you have no idea how your training is going to be now. And that's quite scary as well, because you've gone from having that pain, and I guess in a weird way, at least knowing what to expect in a kind of odd and peculiar way. And so it is a massive change, and it's still definitely a massively taboo topic, even though I think it is becoming more and more spoken about a bit, especially with more women or more athletes speaking about it, but also more women in media, more journalists. A lot more people are looking into it, as well as a lot more doctors are researching into it as well, which is extremely important. But there has been quite a few like standout names that have spoken about it. One that I'm sure you're aware of is Leah Williamson, who, for those of you who somehow don't know who Leah is, she's a lioness and one of England's probably best women's footballers there is, on and off the pitch. A lot of people just love her, really, because she's such a fun, bubbly personality. But she's opened up about how she struggles with endometriosis and how it impacts her. And I've got a clip from an interview she did with Women's Health. I'm just going to play that for you all quickly, because I think it's quite impactful how she speaks about it, and it's nice to hear how it impacts her day to day, not just physically, but sort of mentally and emotionally as well. So I'm just going to play that clip.
My job is a sport. It's all physical. It's all reliant on my body being able to do what it needs to do. So if you're heading into a game and you don't have a physical injury that everybody can see and you can diagnose and everybody knows what it is, you feel like you've done your job. Yet all of a sudden it's the same as if it was an illness. There's this chance that today might be the day that you come on your period. That changes everything. It changes the whole landscape of, you might be really lucky and today might be your lucky day. It's one that just comes and goes without you kind of even noticing. Yet I've been in situations where I've woke up for a day of training, I know I have 2 sessions, or, you know, I'm on the pitch, I'm in the gym, I have to do this, I have to tick this box. Yet the first thing in the morning, I've got cramps, my back aches in a really bad way. You know, I'm tired, I'm clumsy, I've got a headache, all these things that might happen, and especially when you have endometriosis, it's 10 times worse. You know, I have to prepare for this, I have to take my tablets in advance, or to be ready for the fact that this might get me, it might not, it might be a bad one, I might end up on the bathroom floor. You know, I think the fact that we don't really consider that to be we wouldn't class that as an injury, because it's not, it's life, yet the effects it can have on you, even just mentally and being switched on and concentrated, can be so hard to balance alongside being a professional athlete.
Wow, that was quite striking. Yeah, I think it's very
Yeah,
important.
because at first I was thinking of just paraphrasing it, but the more I watched it, the more I really felt like I could feel what she was
Yeah,
trying
it was
to
very
say.
vulnerable and very raw, like to share. And I
Yeah.
think it's sharing those stories and athletes speaking up that is definitely going to sort of combat, because it's not only dealing with like an illness that not many people know, it's also the fact it's period related. So there is a taboo around it, and there is the kind of attitude that, oh no, that's toilet talk, don't bring that here. And so it's nice that people are speaking up and sort of combating both the taboo and educating on a condition that's maybe unheard of.
And yeah, I think it is extremely important because it was heartwarming but heartbreaking at the same time, I
Yeah.
find, to listen to it, because it's obviously upsetting to hear that she's struggling with something that she has absolutely no control over and is impacting her career so much, even at the level she's at. But also, it was nice to hear that she does go through it in a way, because then other people like yourself who are going through that, it's kind of relatable. And maybe young girls who are having extremely painful periods and have no clue what endometriosis are, have heard her talk about it and they're like, oh, I wonder what that is. And maybe they have endometriosis and they've sort of gone down a journey since that. And I think it's quite important for more athletes, if they feel comfortable to, if they have endometriosis, to be empowered to speak about it. Because, yeah, like you said, hearing Leah talk about that so openly and candidly was almost quite a shock, because you just don't get that normally from athletes. You don't get that openness, that honesty. And obviously it affects elite sportswomen like Leah and many other athletes, but also just normal women who just want to exercise for fun, for fitness. If maybe they are trying to hit a target of some sort, if they're wanting to run a race, it affects not just them, and it can actually be quite detrimental to a lot of women's health beyond endometriosis if they can't go and exercise as well, whether it just be running, swimming, going to the gym, whatever it is. And I think that's quite hard as well for women, don't you think?
I do, yeah. I think one thing I heard a lot creating my project is that I can't work from home. And that's something that almost you forget you can take into consideration. Most people will be like, oh, I can just take a sick day. Like, and that is something I've relied on. I've gone, right, okay, it's really bad. I'm bedridden today, so I am going to have to take a sick day. Whereas when I was speaking to the footballers, it's a case of, well, I can't work from home. They have to be in, and they're either training, they're at the gym, or they're on the pitch. And there's no sort of option, because if they work from home, they can't. They if they pull a sick day, then that's detrimental to their future as an athlete and their actual career, and tracking their performance for maybe other teams to take them on if they're in grassroots, or if they're at a really high competition and they're trying to qualify for the next one. They can't risk missing out. And something Leah said is taking the medication sort of in advance. And that was another thing that came up a lot, is a lot of athletes seem to sort of, you can't wait to the moment you're like crashed out on the bathroom floor in that much pain. You have to sort of strike early, and in the likelihood you're going to reach peak pain in a few hours. So that is another thing that they have to keep on top of amongst preparing for the game and running over last minute tactics and things. So it's definitely a very busy mind to have to face.
Yeah, like that mental load of having to keep track of it all is just going to build and build and build. And on top of, like you said, all of the other things that as an athlete you're trying to maintain, even just things like cooking, cleaning, like maintaining your own like mental health, social life, as well as all of the things that come with being an athlete. It's a whole massive thing.
Yeah.
Like women shouldn't really have to deal with, or this many women shouldn't have to deal with it, at least. And it's something that I can imagine is really frustrating as well, because whether you're an athlete or someone who's just trying to go to work or go to the gym, you just want to be able to get on with it. You don't want to have another
It's
barrier.
definitely frustrating. I think as well with the chasing the diagnosis is, and like Leah said, you're constantly sort of like waiting. And there's been a few other players, Bethany England, who was her teammate, she also was waiting for that diagnosis, and it was Emma Hayes, the manager, that stepped in and pushed her towards going for it, and had to see specialists then because on the NHS it wasn't moving quick enough. And I feel like as an athlete you must have a time limit to get that diagnosis. I think everyone is going to want it quick, but as an athlete you've sort of got to justify why every month you can't play to your best performance. And that diagnosis is going to be so crucial in them having to say why, and explain to their teams that it's actually a condition. It's not just them being dramatic or not just them on their period. It's more than that. And so it's definitely frustrating for them to prove that they're really feeling that pain, I think.
Yeah, and I guess it in some sports, or not necessarily even some sports, but with some coaches, there might be a better understanding. Like Emma Hayes has spoken out about a lot of different women's health issues
Yeah.
before. And so endometriosis, I don't know if it's something she struggles with, but she's probably educated on what it is, the struggles it presents in women and athletes. And so having a coach like that is probably quite important for some women.
Yeah, she does struggle with it. And I believe she was pushed to have an emergency hysterectomy because of it during the 2022 Euros. So
Right.
if to the best of my knowledge. So I definitely think she calls out, and you're right, she does really hold people accountable, and she's very informative and educational. So it's definitely good to have a role figure like that for the team, but also the viewers, like you said before, that it's great for people to listen and go, actually, that might be what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, and just for those of you who maybe don't know who Emma Hayes is, she was Chelsea's head coach for quite a few years, the most successful women's head coach there's been for a very long time in the WSL. And she also took Team USA to gold at the Olympics this summer. So
She did.
she's a massive coach. She's a big, big deal in the women's football world. And so for someone like her to be encouraging and pushing for players to look into it if they believe it's something that they do have or might have is quite empowering. But on the flip side, there's athletes who maybe are potentially at a lower level or still potentially at that level, but don't have a coach that understands endometriosis or maybe doesn't understand women's health so much. And that's not necessarily their fault, but if there's not maybe a sports science team on board who are also looking into that, it can make it quite difficult for those athletes to even just approach their coach to talk about it, maybe even. Because I don't know if you're the same, Honor, but even at school, like if you had a male PE teacher, you're not going to want to talk to them
you didn't
about
want to
your
tell
period.
them.
And I'm sure they didn't want to hear because they probably felt a bit awkward. We probably felt a bit awkward. It's awkward all round. And I can imagine
It really
it
is.
doesn't change too much the higher up you go in elite sport. It can still be awkward, I can imagine. And so I think a way to sort of help these athletes at this level is ensuring there's someone in the sports science team that has an understanding of women's health, not just like the body and physiology as a whole, but how women's health impacts the athletes. And it's something that isn't taught enough in sports science. I did a sports science degree in my undergrad and that was not covered like at all. And
Oh, wow.
I guess I don't know, like I guess I can somewhat see the logic because it's maybe not been researched into enough to teach us much about it, but it would have been a great learning curve to give us that opportunity to learn about it, I think. And some people will dismiss it and be like, oh, it affects only half the population. Of like, yeah, it affects half the population. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Like, more than half of the population are women. And like you said, 1 out of 10 of those women will experience endometriosis. And there's so many other women's health conditions that will impact athletes day to day. And I find it extremely frustrating that it's not researched into.
It really is. And I think we're definitely reaching a time where research is, I feel like it's coming because there's definitely been a lot in the media recently challenging that there's no research, raising awareness for conditions like endo, but also the fact that they weren't testing period products with blood and they were testing with water only
Yeah.
up until I think it was last year
Yeah, it
was
was
the first
last year.
study with
Yeah.
blood. Yeah. It's things like that that are really frustrating to hear as a woman. I just hope that we're on this sort of surge of new research coming because I feel like they sort of owe it to us. And hopefully it does work its way into schools and it works its way into degrees. That's really important too.
Yeah, definitely. And even I know there is some research, or quite a lot of research, I believe, being done into how the menstrual cycle in general affects women's ability to perform, whether that
Yeah.
be like what part of the cycle you're in, whether you're feeling high energy, low energy, whether you're feeling stronger, weaker. Like, I know there's a lot of more research being done into that, and that is a great, great first step. But it needs to keep going further. We don't want to sort of get there and be like, okay, yay, we've done that, tick the box and sort of move on. Like, no, we want to keep going and keep going further into, okay, what about endometriosis? How does that affect women who are athletes or women who just want to do sport? And I think it's important for people like us who are creating a voice through journalism to sort of push for that as well, because whilst we may
Yeah.
not be doing the detailed scientific research ourselves, we can talk to the people, we can share those stories and sort of push for it socially, I guess.
I completely agree with that. And I do think the media like taking on these issues and actually sharing them, as well as the athletes choosing to speak up, like Leah and Emma, like them choosing to bring their story to the media and letting journalists like us sort of take it and share it is going to be the start of the change. You're right, we've definitely had research uncovering why it is we get symptoms and why it is the menstrual cycle and how it changes sort of, but we're getting research on like why it is we get symptoms and how the menstrual cycle adapts throughout the full 28 to 31 days. It's just not quite extended to anything abnormal of what they have researched. Essentially anything that doesn't sort of fall in the norm of periods hasn't quite been uncovered as much.
And I guess even just research into endometriosis itself, apart from sport, is extremely limited, I can imagine, because I wouldn't even be surprised if the amount of women that have endometriosis is higher than 1 in 10, because I'd say out of my closest friends at school, more than half of them had extremely painful periods.
Yeah.
And it may not be endometriosis, but it may be. I know a couple of them do have endometriosis and are trying to get that official diagnosis. And but like you said, it just takes so long, and it's insane how long it takes. And it's so frustrating to see them go through that. And you just want to be able to do something to help, because it's then impacting their mental health as well, because they can't do the things that they want to do. And it's extremely annoying, I find, just as someone
It is.
who's...
And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I really do think there are more than 1 in 10 because you've got to take into account that this is a condition that hasn't recently come about, but it's recently been sort of diagnosed. So there's a whole generation of women that would never have known if they had it and they would have just had to suffer with it. So there's all of those women in the older generation that probably will never find out because they maybe don't have their period anymore, and that might be the best cure. But you've also got the women that are too young. So the doctor did actually tell me that you're actually too young to be here. So it's sort of a case of right. So you must, I guess, essentially when you're middle aged, maybe you might get the diagnosis with any luck. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. There's definitely more than 1 in 10. When if you were to give every single person a check in the UK, I reckon the numbers would be higher.
I find that baffling that that doctor said you're too young to be there. How can you be
Yeah.
too young to have
And
endometriosis?
he just shook my hand. He says, "You're too young to be here. We'll see you soon." I was like, "Oh, okay."
And I guess that's part of the big problem as well, isn't it? That a lot of women who go to the doctors, they just get dismissed, and it's, oh,
Yeah,
you're making it up, or oh, it's just painful period. Here, have this sort of paracetamol, or this maybe a bit stronger painkiller, or it's just not being believed by doctors. And it sort of goes back to what you said at the
yeah,
start. You just want that reassurance that that this is what's happening with you, and then you can sort of accept it, and that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, that's it. I think from doing this project, I came across quite a lot of stories of people will constantly go to their GP, and then it's like, no, you've probably just got this, no, you've got that, no, you've got this, because the only way to diagnose properly with endo or adenomyosis is to do a surgery and actually check and look. But that to them is quite extreme. So they don't want to do that. So they push away with almost every other possible explanation in the meantime, which is why it takes so long. But also with them saying you're sort of too young to be here, like athletes in their prime are young, especially nowadays. You see people sort of from like the age of 16 to early 30s is really the peak time for an athlete, and that is young. So they could potentially go their whole athletic career without being told what they actually are facing.
That's such a great point, actually. Yeah, because like you said, so many athletes will be young and they'll have been training from when they were children. Obviously, when
Yeah.
they're a young child, they won't have experienced endometriosis, but you can experience as soon as your early teens. Saying
Yeah,
that
so
you're
periods are 12 average, and then 15 average is when your endometriosis symptoms, if you have it, would start to show.
right, that's really interesting because I think that's also probably lines up around 15 of when a lot of girls who are participating in sport when they're young start to
Yeah,
drop out of sport. And I wonder if that is quite a
that's a
big
really good point.
factor
Yeah.
as well, and one that is maybe not recognized. And it's always put down to, oh, you know, it's boys, or they just don't want to do it anymore, or they're too focused on their looks or social media. And it's like, no, actually, has anyone considered if there's a biological reason behind this
Yeah.
as well? And I think that's
No,
something
that's a
that,
really, really good point, actually.
yeah, it's something that I definitely think should be researched into. I don't know how you would go about doing that, but it's potentially an interesting link, I'd say.
Yeah, I would too. I think there's a lot of reasons that girls drop out of sport, and there should definitely be an effort to sort of stop that and preserve them within sport. But you're right, if that's when heavy periods are really kicking in, that's going to be quite a common reason for a lot of people to say, I actually don't think I can face this. And that's why a lot of people believe you can't have like a physically active career if you do have endometriosis, because a lot of people can't see past the diagnosis and can't see how they'd persevere with it. And I definitely think that's a sort of age where you're making a crucial decision.
And again, that comes back to why it's important for people like Leah and Emma Hayes to speak about it, because they're showing that you can be active. It's going to be hard and you're going to have days where you really struggle, but you can do it if you really want to. And it's not a barrier that's completely stopping you from being active, whether that be at elite level or just social level, just for your own fun and fitness kind of thing. But we spoke about it a little bit briefly already, but it's not just endometriosis that really affects women's performance in sport and physical activity. It's just the menstrual cycle in general, really. And depending on where we are in our menstrual cycle, we have different levels of hormones being released, and that then affects our levels of energy and therefore how fatigued we're feeling or how strong we're feeling. And it's something that I noticed quite a lot when I was particularly in like school and sixth form and university, where depending on where I was in my menstrual cycle, I would feel really strong when I'm in the gym. And like some weeks I'd be like, oh my God, wow, I feel so strong. Like, and I was repping
Yeah,
weights that before I'd have struggled with. And then the next week or a couple weeks later, I'd be really struggling to just lift that weight for 1 or 2 reps, something that I was doing for like 5 or 6 reps, maybe even more, like a couple weeks ago. And it's like, how difficult must that be if your job is to be an athlete, if week by week your physical strength is not the same?
mm. It definitely is difficult. And I think so. A lot of people and athletes are encouraged to keep their natural cycle so that they can track that. Because what you said is quite common. So it's in the late follicular stage of the cycle, as a scientific term. And that is basically when you're going to have your most positive symptoms. So you're going to have like higher gains, you're going to have much better strength. You also have this better risk perception. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to lift a bit heavier this week. I think I can do it. And that all comes in that 7 or so days of the cycle because of the balance and the ratio of hormones. I believe it's your estrogen's high and your progesterone's low, and that's what makes you feel more active. But as soon as those change and when they both drop, you're getting the complete opposite of that, and you're getting no motivation, reduced recovery. You're not hungry, things like that. And that's when reduced coordination is quite an important one for athletes,
Oh,
and they will
wow.
face that in their menstrual cycle. They'll sort of face reduced coordination, and when you're playing sports that involve a ball, so footballers or tennis players, basketball players, anything like that, where you have to sort of navigate yourself and the ball, that's difficult in that week.
Oh, wow. I actually didn't know that. That's really interesting.
I did meet with an academic to know that. I didn't that's not my own knowledge. That is what she shared with me for this project. So yeah, it was definitely really interesting to hear, because I had no idea either until only a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And I guess it makes sense because the hormone changes you go through are so massive that, of course, it's going
Yeah.
to impact something like coordination. But it's just something that I'd never really thought about at all.
You wouldn't think that many things play into your period,
Yeah,
plays into that many things. You wouldn't think coordination had anything to do with whether you're on your period or not.
no. And even, I don't think many athletes have really spoken publicly and openly about how the menstrual cycle impacts their performance. But someone who I know has is Dina Asher Smith, who was the 200-meter world champion in 2019, I believe it was. And she speaks fairly often and quite openly about how it impacts her. And she's shared in post-race interviews a few times that she's really struggling with cramps and fatigue, and she just hasn't performed as she wanted to, despite being so on form, because she's just been unlucky at where she's fallen in her cycle. And I can't imagine how frustrating that is as an elite athlete. A couple of weeks before, you're running times that you know would maybe have won you that medal or got you to a final or done something quite significant. And then a couple of weeks later, when the competition actually comes around, you're in your period cycle where it's just not optimum performance levels for you. And that must be so irritating and frustrating because there's nothing you can do about that.
Exactly.
All the other women you're competing against are likely going through similar things, but it can almost just come down to luck or being unlucky at the end of the day, which as an athlete is something you don't really want to rely on at all because you're training your whole life and then it just comes down to luck on the day.
Exactly. And you're so right. Like the other women are going through that too. But how do you know that it's a crucial peak competition, isn't it? You're in the final of the Olympics and you're on your period, but the person in the lane next to you, they're on their peak performance week because their estrogen's high and their progesterone's low. And they're going to probably outperform you based off of their menstrual cycle alone. And that's such a horrible thought, I think, to think that just because we all go through it, you might not be aligned and someone else might actually have that really good week while you're on the lowest.
Dina actually even said in an post-race interview with BBC Sport that she feels that if endometriosis or the menstrual cycle were a men's issue, then we would have a million different ways to combat it and to make us feel better and to make our way through it without all of the pain and difficulties. But she said with women, there just needs to be more funding in that area. And I think she hit the nail on the head there. Like,
Yeah, she really has.
we just need more funding put into it. And I think there is a growing rise in funding and time and studies looking into it. And it's definitely going to skyrocket over the next few years, I think. But for some athletes, that's too late. Some of them,
Exactly. And it's really crucial that for an athlete, you get it found early so you can say to your coaches, this is what I've got, and they can adapt. And the medical team and the sports science team and all of that can adapt to you. But if you can't say you've got a diagnosis, it's very difficult for them to do that.
then just to sort of start ending off the podcast now, Honor, why is it so important for you that this research is done? Just to sort of recap over all of our points. Why is it so important that this research is done?
I think it's really important for me for two reasons. One being I face it myself, and in a selfish way, I want a diagnosis and I want that research there so that I can rely on it and use it for myself. But also as a sports journalist that sort of prioritizes female sports and female participation in sports, it would be really horrid to see a lack of women within sport because of a reason like periods. There's a lot of things that will contribute to a lack of women in sport, but for one of them to be a biological process that we are essentially forced to deal with, we have no option in the matter, and for that to be something that pushes them away from sport or stops them reaching their highest level and their peak performance, I think that would be terrible, really. And it's not their choice, so why should they not have the research available to them?
Yeah, I definitely fully agree with everything you said. It's so important going forward that, like I think I said right at the start, that this research doesn't just go, okay, we've done it, let's move on to something else. Isn't it? Like, no, we need to keep pushing deeper and deeper into women's health and the menstrual cycle and the different aspects of it not even until we get anywhere, and just to provide women that continued support of understanding it better, because it's going to take a really long time to get a really good understanding on what it is, what we can do to help women. Is there a way to treat it and fix it and cure it? Like, at the moment there isn't, but maybe there is, who knows? But
exactly, it's under research. We can never say no at the moment, can we?
no, exactly. But I hope everyone listening has learnt a little something about endometriosis. I know I definitely have. Even I've learnt some stuff about the menstrual cycle, about the coordination. I actually can't believe that. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for listening, and thank you so much to Honor for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to give your Instagram a shout out?
Yes, you can find me at HMDbrief on Instagram and TikTok, and that's where you'll find all my sports journalism endeavours, really, and this project that I've been working on.
If you want to have a read of Honor's project, I'm sure you can at some point. Do you want to tell us when that might be available?
I will pop the website link into my Instagram bio, so it'll be there. It's a magazine spread, so it's just one page, but there's also a website with a load of information on it too, if you'd like to read about how athletes face their endometriosis diagnosis. And there's also some advice there from a doctor on how to face your endometriosis symptoms if you are someone that struggles.
Perfect. That is great. So yeah, if you want to have a read of Honor's project, go over to her Instagram and the link will be in her bio. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for listening. It's been great chatting to you, Honor. Thank you so much.
It's been really great chatting to you, actually. I think it's really nice that we're doing something and contributing in our little way to get the message out there.
Yeah, definitely. I love doing it, to be honest. But yeah,
Me
thank
too.
you guys for listening. I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.